Hi everyone, welcome to day 6 and today we will be learning about CSS specificity, semantic HTML and positioned elements. So how have you all been doing so far? Okay, let's wait a couple of minutes. Let's see if people are joining the stream and then we'll start with today's session. So today's session is quite heavy. We will be covering quite a lot of topics and we will be learning lots of fun concepts and we'll be making changes to our portfolio and yeah, it will help you grow in understanding. It will help in improving your understanding of CSS as well. So what we'll do now is that we'll get started and so let me open VS Code right now. So I have set up this index.html. Let's open this over here. Localhost 5501. The first topic that we will be learning today is related to CSS specificity. So what basically specificity means is that it helps the browser determine which style to apply when multiple rules are available. So let's understand this with an example. Let me close this and let me zoom in a bit for you guys. All right, so let's create a paragraph. This is a para for testing specificity. All right, and then let me zoom this a bit as well. Okay, so we know that by default the user agent style sheet is applied. That is the default style coming from the browser. Now what we want to do is let's write a style over here. Okay, so within our head tag, let's create a style tag. I'm doing this right now for the purpose of demonstrating things. Whenever you're creating a style, create it in an external file and link that file over here. Okay, so the first thing that we will do is we will just define a style at the element level. All right, so we'll just say color, for example, aquamarine. Okay, let me save this. Okay, so you can see that the color of this paragraph has been changed. Now what happens when I give this element a class? Okay, so what I will do now is, so this is taking precedence over the user agent style sheet. The next thing that I will do is I will give it a class. So I will say, for example, I want to show class level specificity. So let's just give the name class level for example, and let's give it the color as coral for example, and let me set this class over here. Okay, so you can see that the class level rule will take precedence over the element level selector, okay, or the element level rule. Now what I will do is and the order doesn't matter. Okay, so for example, if I move this up, you can still see that even though this rule is coming after the class level rule, right, this is still taking precedence over this rule. All right, then so basically what specificity tells us is that when multiple rules are available and they're being applied on the same element, how does the browser determine which rule to apply. So that is what specificity is about. Okay. Then the next thing that we will be doing is we will be applying rules on the ID level. Okay. So let me give it the name ID level, and I will say color pale, not columns, color pale violet red, for example. And let me give this paragraph an ID level, right? So now you can see that the color of this paragraph has changed. The ID level is taking precedence over the class level as well as the element level rule. Okay. And similarly, even if I move this up, okay, you can see that the other rules are not overriding it. Then we have seen so far that the ID level, it has the highest, value for specificity. Now, for example, I give this element an inline style, okay? And I give it the color, for example, royal blue. If I save this, you can see that the color has changed to royal blue, right? So inline styling has the highest, value when it comes to specificity. Okay. And so, um, so this is the order. Okay. The inline styles have the highest precedence, followed by the ID level rule. Then we have the rules at the class level, and then at the element level. And if I hover over this, you can see this text selector specificity. So if I just ignore the commas for now, just read this value as 100. So the value for a ID level rule is 100. The value for a a class level rule is 10. Okay, ignore the commas. And the value for the paragraph or the element level rule is just 1. Okay, so this is an easy way to remember. So this is basically saying that this is how you can easily remember that. Okay, this is the lowest value, then this is slightly higher than that, and this is higher than that, and you can consider this having the value as 1000. Okay, so this has the highest value. Now there is an exception to all of this. So for example, I give this element an important uh, value like this. Okay, this is a special rule which basically it will override everything else. Okay, if I save this, you can see that it is overriding all the other rules, even the inline styles. All right, but you should not use this rule unless it is absolutely necessary, because the only other way to overrule this important attribute is by, or this important property is by overriding it with another important property. So for example, I change if I want to change the color now, the only way I can do it is I can use another uh, rule which has this important besides it. Okay, so only then it is actually going to override this other important rule. So as you can see, this is creating a mess, right? So the only way to override this rule is by writing another rule which has the important uh, keyword in it. So try avoiding this. Follow the class level or the ID level rules, and That is what you need to keep in mind. So you can see that I have removed the important keyword, and now the inline rule is taking precedence once again. Now let's try and understand what happens when so let me get rid of this. Okay, and let me give this the value as royal blue, for example. Now we have two rules which are of the same specificity, right? So in that case, uh, the let me comment out these two rules as well. Okay, so we have two rules with the same specificity. So in that case, the rule which is coming later on, that will take precedence. All right. So if there are two rules which have the same specificity value, the one which is being defined later on, in this case it is this one, this will take precedence over the first one. All right. And let me get rid of this over here as well, and let me uncomment these two rules as well. And if we inspect this in the browser, and if we take a look over here, you can see that the element rule, it has been striked out. Then the class level rule has been striked out, and the id level rule is the one which has been applied. So this is what specificity helps us determine. Okay, it this is what the browser uses to determine specificity. Now for example, uh, I have this rule, a more specific rule. Okay, p and then id level. Okay, like this. So it's basically selecting the paragraph which has the id value as id level. Okay, so it will be the same element, but if you notice the specificity value over here, it's 101. Okay, so just remember the thing. So the value for the id level was 100, then the value for the element level was 1, right? So you add 100 plus 1, so it gives you the value as 101. Okay, now similarly, if I have a rule like this, okay, we have a paragraph element and a class level element. So the class level element has the value as 10, and this has the value as 1. So 10 plus 1, 11. So 11 is still less than 101, right? So that is why this is taking precedence over this one. So if I mean, you can have more specific rules, and the specificity value will change as the rules get more specific. But even in that case, the rule which has the highest value, that will be the rule which will be applied by the browser. Okay, so I hope the concept of specificity is clear to you guys. You can let me know in the comments. Okay, so everybody is saying that it's clear. And let's and another thing I wanted to ask you guys, is the box sizing concept clear to you guys? What is content based box sizing, and what is border box? Is that clear to you guys? Okay, all right, so that concept is clear to you guys as well, so I will not repeat it. uh, and okay, but okay, so most of you are saying that it is clear. And there's a question, will we get code for the previous videos? Yeah, you will get it. I've created a GitHub repository on the Devsnest GitHub. link, and you can access the portfolio from there. I'll share the link with you guys in just a bit. A few of you are saying that box sizing is not clear, so I'll just go over it very quickly. Okay. All right. So suppose we have a div, all right, and within that we have another div. Let's give this a class box, and let's give this a class box as well. Let's define our box class over here, and let's give it a width of 400 pixels and a height of 400 pixels. Let's give it a padding of 16 pixels. Okay, and let's give it a background color um, of coral. Okay, so you can see that this box is available to us. What we will do is go on, get rid of this for a minute. Let's create a element known as let's create a rule known as child. Let's give it a different background color, for example royal blue, and let's apply this child class over here. So you can see that this is the child, and we will say the width of the child is 100%. All right. So the expected behavior was that you can see that we have applied a padding of 16 pixels, right? So the expected behavior was that this blue square or this blue box, it should have fit inside the the parent box, right? But it's not happening, and the reason is that by default the box sizing for the element, okay, so this, as we know, we have this box model, right? So if we are inspecting the box sizing for this element, the content is actually being applied the height and width as 400 pixels, right? And then the padding is being applied on top of that. So the dimensions are actually 400 plus 16 on the left and 16 on the right, so it is 432. And similarly, there's a padding on the top and the bottom as well, so it actually becomes 432 pixels by 432 pixels. So if we hover over this element, you can see it right over here, 432 by 432. But this is not the desired behavior, right? We were expecting that this should have fit inside the parent element, which is this one, right? So in order to do that, we have this property available with us known as box sizing. The default value is content box. Okay, so whatever value that we are setting is applied to the content, and then on top of that the padding and the border is applied. If we want to change that behavior, we set this to border box, right? So the moment I applied this change, you can see that this child div is now being contained within the parent. All right, and the total dimensions are now 100% of whatever space is available. Okay, so you can see that now the dimensions are 400 by 400. All right, so is this clear to you guys? What is box sizing? Okay, so now it's the box has the dimensions which we are setting it instead of the content. So this is the content part, right? Okay, great. So we have covered this topic as well. Now let's move on to the next topic, which is semantic HTML. Now what does that mean? What does it mean by semantic HTML? So far we have been using tags like div and span. Okay, this is a span. And you can see that by looking at these tags, we do not understand anything about the kind of content which might be there inside these elements. So what could be rather than what could be so it's not very clear, right? What is a div, what is a span, what kind of content might come inside it. When you look at this paragraph or this p tag, you know that this is a paragraph. When we use a heading tag like this, we know that this is a large heading. Okay, so all of these tags like the paragraph and the h1, the link tag, that is the anchor tag, they, but just by looking at the tag we are able to understand that what kind of content, or what is the meaning of this tag, right? What kind of content is expected within this tag. Not only is this helpful to us, it is also helpful for the browser to understand, just by looking at the tags, what kind of content is expected, especially in cases where screen readers are being used. So looking at the tag, the browser, or rather the screen reader, might give some particular information to the person who has maybe some vision disability, or any other sort of disability. So it is helpful not just to us or someone who's looking at the HTML document, it is also helpful for the browser. Okay, so let's look at a few of the tags which are semantic. All right, so as HTML evolved, it introduced semantic tags. These were tags which were there from the beginning. So what I will do now is, let's move on to our portfolio, and we'll update our portfolio with the semantic tags. All right, let me open it. So this is our portfolio, right? Which we had created till yesterday. Let's open this in the browser. Okay. All right. And if we look at the structure over here, it mostly consists of divs. That is just, I mean, that is basically the tag that we are using so far to distinguish between the different content which is available within our website. So one of the tags which is available is known as main, right? So the main tag tells us what is the main content within our document. All right, so our main content starts from here, right? So let's rename this as main. So this has a more appropriate meaning, and it uh, in the context right now, this is basically telling us that this is where the main content starts from, right? So let me save this, and you can see that still that it is being shown the way it was. Then we have this intro section, right? So we have another tag known as article. All right, so this tag basically generally begins with a heading, and then we can have multiple paragraphs in it. And what this tag basically conveys is that whatever content is inside it, it is you know this whatever content is inside it, it basically describes everything related, everything that is there, it describes it completely. All right, even individually, if we move this part to some other website, it is sufficient to describe this section. Okay, whatever info is inside it, that is self-sufficient, and it is describing this entire area. All right, so it is just like a normal article. All right, you can see the description over here. It says that represents a complete or self-contained composition in a document, page, or application. It is independent and it is distributable or reusable. All right, so it is similar to an article in a magazine or a newspaper. Like, it is self-sufficient. So we will convert that div into an article. Let me save this, and you can see that it's still working, but it is more meaningful now. Apart from that, another tag which is available to us is known as section. And another thing is, okay, let me just move on to the other tag and then I'll tell you something else with regards to the article tag. So another tag which is available to us is the section tag. So over here, if you see, we have different sections, right? We have a section for about me, we have a section for qualifications, hobbies, technologies, and then the contact me. All right. So these are the different sections which are available to us. So you can use this tag whenever you want to, divide your web page or website into different sections. You could have also used an article, but since I wanted to demonstrate that we have also this tag available to us, so we are using the section tag over here. All right. And also within an article, you can have multiple sections. And even a section tag generally begins with a heading, and then there is some or the other description about what this section is about, basically, right? So this is what we are going to do for the remaining sections as well. I will convert these divs into sections. All right. Okay. Section. And what is this? Which tag is this? And then over here also, let's convert this div into a section as well. And then what we want to do is all the this is a form, right? And inside this also we have all of these divs, so we can group these as sections also. This is the section for the first name, this is the section for the last name, or if we want, we can leave it as it is as a div. Even that is fine. All right, so for now I'll just replace this with a section tag. Okay. And if you have noticed, some of the styling has been broken, so let's adjust our styles. So over here we were making use of the div to style the heading and center it. I have replaced all of these with a section. So let's save this, and you can see the headings are back in the center. Then another thing that we can do is, let's fix the styling over here for these as well. Let's increase the font size. So if you have noticed over here, we have defined multiple CSS selectors over here, right? Input within the contact form, text area, and button. So you can use a comma to separate, uh, define multiple rules, and all of the rules can have multiple, have the same, properties associated to them. So this is how you can do that. Let's give the font size as 1.2 rem. Okay, and let's also give it a little bit of padding, say 16 pixels. Let's save this. I guess 16 is too large. Let's change it to 8, and you can see that this has been styled correctly. And another thing that we can do over here is that we have this section over here, right? And there is what we can do is for the contact me section, we can define a margin. Okay, can define a margin top of 16 pixels like this. You can see that some space has been added between these two elements. So these are some of the semantic tags which are available to us, which help us better describe the document which we have created. Let's do another thing over here. So suppose we want to add links for all the headings which are there within our document. So for that we have the header tag available, okay, which describes the header in a document. It can also describe a header within a section or an article, but in this case we are using this header tag, so it is clearly defining that, it indicates the beginning of, the beginning section of the document. So we have the header over here, and then we have the main content, right? And since we want to have some links to all the different, sections, we can make use of the nav tag, which we can use for navigation basically. And what we will do over here is we have how many sections: about me, qualifications, hobbies, technologies, and then we have a section for contact me. So a total of 5 sections, right? So let's create 5 anchor tags over here. Okay, and another thing that you can do with anchor tags is that if an element has this ID attribute, you can set the anchor tags value to that ID. Okay, so the first section is about me. Then the next, we can say over here about me. All right, like this. Similarly, the name of the next section is qualifications. Qualifications. We will say qualifications over here. And then the next section is hobbies. Hobbies like this. And then the other section is technologies. Let's give it the text technologies. And lastly we have the contact contact me, and we will say contact over here. All right, another thing is we'll make use of this hash symbol so that it knows that it needs to go to that particular ID like this. So let's save this, and if we go to the top we can see that we have this header available to us, and then we have all of these links. Now suppose I click on hobbies, right? You can see that it took me to this section directly. Okay, so using the anchor tag, not only can you navigate to an external link, you can also use it to navigate within your website. Okay, you just specify the ID of the attribute, ID of the element to which you want to navigate to, and it will scroll to that point. All right, now what we will do is we will style the navigation. So let's do that over here. And another thing is we have set the box sizing as border box over here so that we don't face any of those styling issues. All right, so we have our header, right? So what we will do first is within the header, let's set a padding of 16 pixels. So you can see that a padding has been added over here. Then the header has a nav tag inside it, right? So what we want to do is, and within the navigation, all the anchor tags which are there, all right, we want to give a margin of 16 pixels. So you can see that this spacing is available, right? And if I click on technologies, it takes me to technologies. And if I click on contact, it is taking me to, so basically it scrolls to that particular area. Let's apply another trick over here. So at the HTML level, we want to say scrolling, or rather scroll behavior, and we want to set it to smooth. All right. And now when I'm clicking on any of these links, you can see that it is scrolling smoothly to that particular section. Okay. If I click on hobbies, it is taking me to hobbies, right? And you can see that when I have clicked on qualifications is visible, right? So it automatically calculates till what point in the viewport we need to scroll to so as to get to that content. Okay. All right, so this is how you can give a nice scrolling effect within your application, and we have also defined a header over here. Okay. Similarly, so once all of our content is over, we can also add a footer over here as well. So we can say over here that made with, you know, um, heart Devsnest. Okay, for example. And you can see that this footer is available over here. Let's style our footer. Let's give it a margin, not margin, let's give it a padding of 16 pixels like this. And you can see that this text is available. And another thing that we can do for now is that we can say text align center like this. And you can see that this section is available. And we can also give it a border at the top. Let's set it as 4 pixels and solid. Okay, so we have set a, so this is clearly distinguishing between the content and the footer. You can have other links over here in the footer as well. I leave that up to you. And for example, you have generally seen that we have this copyright, and the ear symbol like this, for example. So you can add that as well. Okay. So you, instead of Devsnest, you can add your name also. So made with heart by Gaurav, for example, and copyright, and this is the year, for example. So you can have this information available in the footer like this. Okay. Uh, there's a question how to use emojis. On Mac, if you just hold the function key, it displays it displays this window like this, and then suppose I search for heart, I have all of these things available. I think on Windows there's a similar feature available, I guess. You guys can search it on Google, I'm sure you'll find it. Okay. So far, we have modified, we have added the semantic HTML. So you guys understand the difference. We could have represented all of this with a div and a span or a paragraph, but now it is just by looking at the tags, it is clear, right? So this section, it will probably have our header. By looking at this tag, we know that we will be having our navigation links over here, right? Main is the main content of the website, and then within the footer we will be having, information that you need to display. A footer generally comes at the bottom. There are many more tags available, such as side nav and aside. So the list of all the other tags has been shared in the assignment. You will find it. You will find the links, in the resources associated with the assignment. Okay. All right. So is this clear to you guys? What is semantic HTML? You can read more about it later on. Okay. Another topic that I wanted to cover today is about the color attribute. So let's do one thing. Let's go back to our previous example that we have defined over here. So there are different types of values that you can set to the color property. Okay. So for example, if we look at this paragraph, over here we have been using keywords, right? So by keyword, what I mean is that we have been giving, some names like red, royal blue, pale violet red, color. So these keywords convey a certain meaning to the browser, and that color is applied. But this is not the only way you can define a color. These are like keywords are helpful when, when you're teaching stuff or you're just trying to build something. So for educational purposes, I find these to be useful, or when we're learning things, right? The other way by which we can set colors is by using the hex format. So within the hex format, we represent the colors as RGB, but instead of using digits, we use hexadecimal numbers. Now, hexadecimal numbers are available. Uh, so basically, normally we use the decimal number system, right? So there are digits available from 0 to 9, correct? In case of hexadecimal, we have 16 digits available, that is 0 to 9, and then alphabets from A to F. Okay. So for example, if I want to use a hex value over here, so we specify that as RGB basically. So for example, I want to give this a color of black, right? So 0 indicates that red is 0, then 0 for green, and then 0 for blue. And to indicate that we're using a hex value, we use the pound sign basically. So you can see that the color for this paragraph has been changed to black. All right. If I click on this, you can see that the color picker has been opened, and suppose I want to set the color as red. All right. What I can do is, suppose I want only red color to be seen, I can just set this as FF. So this is the maximum value. Uh, and then the first two digits, right, F and F, it represents numbers from 0 to 256. in hexadecimal format. So FF basically represents, uh, sorry, not 0 to 256, 0 to 255. So it represents 256 values that we can set for the red color. Similarly, 256 values that we can set for the green color, and so on for the blue color as well. Okay, so if I just say FF and I give the other two as 0000, it is basically setting the color as red. All right, and you can play around with the other values as well to modify the color. Okay, so the problem with this format is that it's not very, easy to understand, right? It's not readable easily. So it is basically selecting the different hexadecimal values, but it's not very easy for us to understand this. And especially when we're trying to change the color, it's quite difficult. So another format which is available to us is known as the RGB format, which is basically the same thing, but we use the RGB function like this, and we specify the red, green, and blue values. The range is the same from 0 to 255. So if I want to set the color as green, let me give this as 0. Let me give the green value as 255 and this as 0. And you can see that this paragraph is now being shown as green. And then other variations of green and all of this. And I'm using the arrow keys, up and down arrow keys, to change the value. So you can see that the green color has changed slightly. If I use a much lower value over here, for example 34 like this, or rather 78, it has got a very dark green color right now. Okay, so this is another way by which we can set a color. All right, and the advantage with this one is that at least it is in decimal numbering format, right? It is easier for us to read this. The next format which is available to us is the HSL format, okay, known as hue, saturation, and lightness. So over here, hue basically represents the color, okay. Then saturation represents the the vibrancy of that color, okay, like how bright that color is, or how much how much it is on the grayer side of the spectrum, right? And the third parameter is known as the lightness, which just indicates how light or dark the color is. So let's look at this format. So suppose so we are using the color picker provided by Chrome, and you can use this to change the color format. Suppose I want to switch to HSL like this. So now the value is being shown in the HSL format. So the hue is represented in degrees, right? So we have 360 degrees available to us. So for example, we have a circle over here, right? And this basically indicates 0 degrees. Okay. Then this is, 90. And similarly, we have 180 and 270, and then this is 360, the entire circle. So the colors are available. We provide the colors in degrees, right? So for example, we start with, say, a shade of white, and as we are going around, we are moving to red, shades of red, and shades of blue, green, and so on, right? So there are multiple colors which we can specify using the degrees. All right, so let's change the degree over here. Okay, as I'm changing the degree over here, you can see that um, let me brighten this. So this is for brightening the color. You can see that the green color is becoming lighter and lighter. Okay, and let me change the saturation value as well. Okay, so let me change the degree to something else. Say for example, if I just change it to 50, this is slightly on the brown side. If I change it to, for example, 279, you can see that it is slightly on the violet side. And if I change the saturation level, you can see that it's becoming more and more, you know, visible, right? It is becoming more and more vibrant. Uh, let me zoom this for you guys so that you can clearly see the change which is happening, right? So if I change the saturation value, okay, over here, it is becoming less and less vibrant. If I take it pretty low, you can see that it has turned gray basically. Okay, so as I told you, saturation tells us, how it moves on from the gray spectrum. So the lower the value, the grayer that color appears, to a more vibrant or a bright shade of that color. So you can see as I'm increasing this, it is becoming more and more purplish, right? So you specify the value in percentages, and similarly if I want to make this light, I can increase this value. So you can see that it's becoming lighter and lighter, right? And if I want this color to be dark, I can just reduce this value. Okay, so this is much easier to play around, right? You select a shade of the color using the degrees, then you can make it more vibrant or grayish using the saturation value, and you can make it lighter or darker using the lightness attribute. So another thing is that we can either specify the value using commas, okay, or we can use spaces. Okay, this is the convention which is being followed lately, that we use spaces to separate the values. We can also use this for the RGB format as well. Then there is another thing known as opacity. To specify the opacity, we make use of this division sign, and one indicates basically that this element that this color rather that this element is completely opaque. Okay, it is completely solid. Suppose I give the value which you can specify for opacity, it is between 0 and 1. Okay, so 1 represents 100%. Either you can specify the value between 0 and 1, or you can set this as say zero point 0.5 to indicate 50%. So you can see that it is 50% visible. Okay, or you can think that it is 50% transparent. Okay, so if you want this to be completely transparent, you can set the value as 0, and basically that means that it's not visible anymore, it's completely transparent. If we give it the value as 0.75, we can see that it is 75% transparent, 75% opaque. That means 25% transparent. Okay, so this is another way by which you can set the this is another attribute that you can use. Okay, this is also available for the RGB values. So for example, we have RGB like this, and you can see that we can specify the RGB values like this, or we can make use of comma. If we use comma, then the fourth value is also set as comma over here. Okay, So 100% means it is completely opaque. So either you can use percentages, or you can use a value between 0 and 1 to indicate percentages as well, right? So these are the different color units which are available to us. I hope this is clear to you guys. You can let me know in the comments. Yeah. Okay. So it's clear to you guys. Shall we take a break right now, or would you guys like to continue? Let's do one thing. Let's take another couple of examples, and then we'll take a short break. Okay. All right. So the next thing that we will be learning is basically pseudo classes. All right. What does that mean? So, for example, what I want to do is when I'm hovering the mouse over this element, I want the color of this element to change. So, how can I do that? So, the way I can do that is I can make use of pseudo classes, which allow us to define rules whenever the state of an element changes. Okay, so this is more appropriate to, for example, a button or a link, right? So what we will do over here is that, okay, I think it would be better if I explain this example using our portfolio. Okay, so let's go back to the code for portfolio, and suppose what we want is that by default we do not see these links, okay, this underlined text. So what we will do is we will say, we'll go to our header, and for the anchor tag we will say text decoration as none. So you can see that the underlining has it's not there anymore. Then what I want is whenever the user is hovering over these links, at that point of time I want to show the underline. So what I will do is I will make use of a pseudo class, and there are different states available, right? So when my mouse is over this element, it is known as the hovering state. So in order to write to access a state, you make use of this colon, and you give the name of the state that you want to access. So we want to access the hover state. Okay, when that happens, we want to set the text decoration as underline. All right, now when I'm moving the mouse over this element, you can see the underline is back on. Okay, by default it's not there, but when I put my mouse over that element, it is there. And suppose uh, you want to test this functionality, right, in the browser. Let me comment this out for now. So we select the element, so it is this element, and you see this colon hov. Just click on this, and these are the different states which are available on an element. Okay, so we are interested in the hover, right? Okay, so let's define that over here. When the actually, let me re-enable this, and you want to test this styling, right? So we select this element. When you select this element, you click on this hover button and then select this property. So it will show the styles which have been applied when this state is true. So this is a debugging functionality that you can use, and you can test the different states which are available. And another thing is, for example, you can see that the color of the link was originally blue, and when we started clicking on it, it changed to this color of purple. Suppose what I want is I want to target the visited state, right? And in that case, I want to what I want to do is I can say color. Let me set it as for example royal blue. Okay, so all the links which have been visited, right, will have the color as royal blue. Okay, the default thing is some shade of purple. So this is another state that you can target. So whenever you want to target an element's particular state, you can make use of the colon and followed by the name of the state that you want to target, right? And suppose now I want to see what happens when this element has been visited. When I click on this, you can see that it is showing the style associated with that state. By default, we do not see this information, right? It's when we select these, you can see that these styles have been applied. Okay. Okay. So this is like these are some of the states which are available. There are many more states available, but I just wanted to show you an example. So what we'll do now is that whenever we hover over these anchor tags, we want to set the background color to let's select. What we'll do is let's give the background color as gray, for example. Okay, let me get rid of this. You can see that this is being shown, right, whenever we are hovering over this element. And let's make this slightly better. So what we will do is we'll give it let's also give a slight padding over here, 8 pixels. Now when I'm hovering over these elements, you can see we have this effect. Another thing that we can do is let's inspect this. Let's target the anchor tag. Let's select the hover style. Let's make this slightly transparent. Okay, like this. And let's take the HSL value. Let me copy this and let's paste it here like this. Okay, now let's do a refresh. Now when we are, I guess it became a bit, wait, did I do something wrong over here? Let's select this element on hover. Oh, okay, I forgot to remove this, right? Okay, right. So you can see that now when I'm hovering over all of these elements, we are giving it a background. So you can apply this effect as well. I just wanted to show you another example. But right now, let's switch this back to text decoration. And we will set this back to underline. I personally prefer this effect to that effect. Okay. All right. So this is what you can do using the pseudo classes. All right, we can also, so for example, when I have clicked on this or rather when I have clicked on this button, right, if I want to change the color for this element, this input element, when it is in focus, so similarly we can say let me do this using CSS over here. So I will select the contact and input, then on focus, right? Because you can focus inside an element. So we can set the outline as, for example, 2 pixels solid. And suppose I want to show the color as some shade of green. When I click on this, you can see the outline is being shown as green, right? So this is another state which is available to us. Let me remove this. Okay, so the default one is good enough for us. So this is how you can make use of pseudo classes and set the styling information. All right, and there are many more pseudo classes available to us. Okay, just like we have pseudo classes, we have pseudo elements. All right. Um, so what does that mean? Pseudo elements. It means that those are elements which are actually, let me show you the example first, and then I guess it will be clear to you. Let's go back to our previous example. Okay. And over here, we have this paragraph, right? So let's define a pseudo element. What we want to do is when we have this paragraph, so when you want to define a pseudo element, you make use of these double colon like this. There are different types of pseudo elements available. Let's target the after one. Okay. And what we want to do is there's a content property available. We want to show, for example, diamonds as the content, and we want this to have a color of Indian red, for example. Okay, when I save this, you can see that using CSS we added an element, right? So that is why this element is known as a pseudo element, because this element was created rather not created using a HTML tag. All right, so this is not really a actual tag, but created using this pseudo element. All right, so you can set all of the other properties over here, for example, border 1 pixel, solid, like this. So it has been applied a border, and just like we have after, we have something known as before. Okay, and you can see that this para is then surrounded by these diamonds, and if we inspect in the browser, okay, if you examine this, you should see this before and after pseudo element like this, and when we select it, you see the styling information associated with that element. So this is known as pseudo element. Okay, suppose I have an input element over here like this. Let's give it a placeholder. This is a placeholder. All right, and you see by default this has kind of a grayish color. Suppose I want to change the color for this placeholder. What I can say is input placeholder. I can change the color over here using the pseudo element selector. And suppose I want to change the color to, let's say, brown. Okay, when I save this, you can see that this placeholder is being shown as brown. All right, so we can do quite a lot of things using the after and before. We'll look at uh, this later on. We'll learn the use cases through some examples, but right now I just wanted to introduce you guys to pseudo elements. uh, these aren't used that much, but still there are some use cases where we can use these. All right. Okay. All right, so what we will do now is that let's take a short break of 5 minutes and then we will continue. All right, so are you guys able to follow along so far? You can let me know in the comments. Yeah, we'll be learning about the gradient color in one of the upcoming classes. Okay, so don't worry. But if you're really curious, you can Google about it right now. It's pretty straightforward. You can use the background property, and there is a way by which you can define the gradient. Okay. So the difference between border and outline, right? So whenever we are, selecting this input element, it has something known as the thing that we're seeing right now, that is known as the outline. Let me apply border to this. Okay. Border, the syntax is somewhat similar. Okay, and right now this has, let me increase the size of the border to say 4 pixels. Okay, by default, another thing is by default, whatever is the color of the value of the color, that is the default color for the border. Okay, since we have set the input uh, element to have the color as brown. Okay, that is why you're seeing a brown border. If we get rid of this property, you can see that it has a border of the default color is black, right? That is why we see this black color. Let me zoom this for you guys. Do you see we have this black border, and when I am focusing on it, the outline is available to us. Okay, so it is another you can say another layer which is which basically gets uh, you know applied to that element. Okay, we generally do not mess around with the outline, because the outline is useful. Suppose you have multiple input tags, okay, like this, and you're filling up a form, right? So if you hit the tab key, the outline generally tells us where the focus is on. Now, suppose if I add a button over here as well, okay, some button, all right. If I move, from this input element, this is the outline being set for that button. It is used to indicate the element which is in focus at this point of time. All right. So, uh, this is the difference between border and outline. It is used to indicate that the element is active or it is in focus. That is where the outline is useful. So you can change the outline color basically if you want to show a different color, but generally do not turn it off, because it is helpful in these scenarios to indicate when the element is active or not. All right. So this is the difference between border and outline. So border is coming as part of the box model, and Outline is basically, used to indicate a certain state associated with that element. All right. Mhm. So the next thing that we will be learning today is related to positioning. So far we have give me a sec. Yeah. So far we have looked at the flow based algorithm, which is the natural way the elements are placed within a website. That is, if the element is a block level element like this paragraph, for example, if we inspect this, it's taking up the entire width which is available to it, right? And if it's an inline element like a span or something, it is taking up only the space that is required by its content. Okay. Let's look at oops yeah let's look at another way by which we can define how these elements can be positioned. All right. So in order to do that, what I will do is, let me just refresh this. Okay, so we have this available with us. Let me get rid of this. So the next type of layout that we will be looking at is known as the position based layout. So by default, if we inspect this element and we search for the position, okay, you can see the default position is static. All right, that is that what this indicates is that no position has been set for this element. Now let's see the next one. Okay, if you see the value of position as static or initial, it indicates that no positioning has been set for this element. Let's look at a value other than this for this property. So what we will do is, for this hang on a sec. Yeah, let me just get rid of these elements and let me comment this out as well. All right, now what I will do is, we will set the position for this element as relative. Okay, this is the first type of value that is available for positioning. Suppose I set this to relative, and let's inspect this element now. In the styles, and you can see that it has a position of relative. Now, what this basically means is that so far you don't see any difference in the way this element has been laid out, right? It is appearing as it would appear normally. But since we have changed the position from static or initial to relative, it gives us access to certain properties. All right. Suppose I want to move this element from the left by 50 pixels. Okay, when I do that, you can see that this element has been shifted from its original position by 50 pixels. Okay, so it has those values available, similar to how we provide you know padding or margin. We can provide these values from at the top, at the bottom, towards the right, as well as the left. Similarly, you can change the position of this element from where it would normally occur by using these properties. Okay, so we can displace this element. So suppose I want to move this from the top by 100 pixels. So you can see that it has moved from the top by 100 pixels. Now it is moving relative to where it would normally appear within the document. All right. Similarly, if I wanted to move from the left by 50, sorry, not from the left, from the right by 50 pixels. Okay, uh, can do so like this. Let me move this over here. As I increase the value, okay, so it is shifting that element from the right. It shifted that element towards the right by that many values. Okay, like this. Suppose I set the so this is where, let me unset this, right? So this is where it was appearing normally. Okay, if I set the right as 8 pixels, you can see that from where it would appear normally, from this side it is shifting by 8 pixels. If I give a negative value, it would shift in this direction, in the opposite direction, by that many pixels. Okay, and similarly we can specify the bottom value as well. And from the bottom, so by initially it is 0, right? If I give a negative value, it will move from the bottom by that many pixels, and if I give a positive value, it will move up by that many pixels. So we can use any of the units, right? Um so not just pixels. For example, I wanted to move by left by around 25%, I can do so as well. So I can use a percentage, I can use pixels, I can use a rem, or any of the other units which we use to define which are available to us. So this is the first one, position relative. So it moves relative to its original position by that many the values that we are providing over here. All right, so if I do not set any of these properties, you would see that this appears exactly where it would appear normally, right? But it is doing something else as well behind the scenes. um, to understand that, let's look at the next value which is available to us. So yeah, another thing is, if you remember, inline elements, we can only apply padding and margin to those elements on the left and the right. Okay, we cannot move the inline elements up and down, right? But for example, let me add a span over here, or rather, let me just make this text as strong. Okay, para, and I'll just say strong over here. Let's save this, and let's define some style for the strong tag over here. Let's give it a color of black. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so you can see that this para, or rather this piece of text within the paragraph, is appearing in the black color, and this is an inline element, right? Suppose I set its position. So first thing that I will do is we will apply a padding on the top by 10 pixels. So you can see that it did not have any impact on this, right? It did not move up or down. Let's give it a margin from the top by 10 pixels. It did not do anything, right? Now I change its position to relative. Let's save this. Okay, and let's try to change its margin now. Okay, not its margin, let's try to just change the value for the top. Okay, if I save this, you can see that this element is appearing below. If I give it a negative value, you can see that it's somewhat floating in the air, right? So when we change the position of an inline element or even a block level element, uh, so earlier we were not able to do anything with the inline element in terms of the in the vertical direction, right, or the y-axis, but using position we can do so as well. So when you set this value something other than static, it is no longer being laid out as a flow element. Okay, so then you can even change the styling for inline elements, you can move them around. All right, so as I was saying, the relative element applies another constraint, and to understand what is that, let's let's look at the next type of property which is available to us. Okay, known as, let me get rid of this, let me just comment this out for now, or rather let me keep this, and let me move this tile over here so that it's easier for us to work with this. So let me comment this out for now, and let's set the position as absolute. The moment I set the position as absolute, did you notice that this element basically, moved out of this, and the paragraph basically took up the space that, all of these characters, they basically shifted, to occupy the space that this para was taking, and this shifted up by 10 pixels. Okay, if I set this, if I get rid of this, for example, okay, you can see that the para is appearing where it would appear normally, but it's overlapping this this text which was there, right? Um that is because what the absolutely positioned element does is that, what this property does is that it moves that element, or it breaks that element out of the natural flow. The natural flow would be that it would appear over here, right? But when you set the position as absolute, it does not occupy that space. Instead, that space is filled up by the surrounding elements. Okay, uh, let's take another example of this. Let me create another paragraph over here, another, let me just call this as absolutely positioned para. Let's save this. um, let's give this a class abs, for example. So p dot abs, let me just call it as absolute. We should follow proper naming convention for things, and we set the position as absolute. Okay, and if I set the top as 0, okay, and suppose I set the left as 0 as well. Hang on a sec. Okay, I had made a spelling mistake. So if I set the top as 0, you can see that it's basically overlapping on top of that element. Suppose uh, I want this element to appear at the top right hand corner. Okay, so I can set the top as 0 and the right as 0. So you can see that it's appearing in the top right hand corner for now. So that you guys understand this better, let me comment this paragraph out. Okay, so the absolutely positioned element tries to position itself relative to the uh, you know uh, the viewport. All right, if it does not, I mean, it tries to position itself based on the parent element or the container element. And if we set the top as 0 and the right as 0, it is positioning itself in the top right hand corner. Suppose I set the suppose I want this to appear in the bottom right hand corner, right? So I can say bottom 0 and uh, right 0. Okay, so now it's appearing at the bottom right. And similarly, if I want this to appear in the bottom left, so I can do it like this. All right, so it is basically moving all around this, it is positioning itself relative to the viewport right now. Now suppose I have this this div, okay, or rather this section, and let me move this paragraph within this section, and this section has the positioning set as relative. Okay, all right, so since this is the parent element right now, and we have set the position for this element as relative, the element which is absolutely positioned will try to all of these values of top, right, and bottom will be based on, or rather it will position itself with respect to this section tag. All right, okay, so let's inspect this element. Okay, this section is positioned relatively. All right, let's do one thing, let's give this section a height of 400 pixels, and let's give it a border of 1 pixel solid. Okay, let me reduce this, let's make this as 200. All right, so this is the entire space taken up by this section, and suppose I want to position this paragraph relative to this this particular element only. Okay, earlier it was positioning itself with regards to the viewport, right? Since it was not able to find any relative you know um, element or relative parent, it went up to the topmost level, which would be the viewport, right, and it was trying to position itself relative to that, right? But since we have defined this section's position as relative, now it will only move around or position itself within that section. Let me give it a width as well so that you guys understand it better. Let's set the width as 200 pixels as well, so it's only this area. Now when I set the right value as 0, okay, it will only move to the right within this container. Okay, if I increase the width to say 300, it is positioning itself relative to this element, its parent element. All right, earlier if I get rid of this, you know it will try to position itself with respect to the viewport, since it does not have any immediate relative, any ancestor element which has the position set as relative. All right. So when we set the position as relative, it applies a constraint on all of its children, that if you try to position yourself absolutely, you will be only be able to position yourself within that element. All right. So we set the right as, suppose I want to set the right as 20%. So it will move 20% from the right like this. And from the top, I want to move down by 50%. All right. Let me give semicolon. So you can see that it has moved from the top by 50% and from the right by 20%. All right. So this is where the relatively, you can use the absolutely positioned element. The next thing that is of interest to us is that what I was telling you guys earlier is that, suppose if you notice that when I had added this element, right, and let me get rid of this section once again. Okay. And position is absolute right now. Let me set the top value as 0. Okay. You can see that it is overlapping this paragraph over here, right? So that is because it is, taken out of the flow, and they are rendered on top of the non-positioned elements. So it's like this: all of the non-positioned elements are rendered first, then the positioned elements are rendered. So since we have set the top value as 0, and this does not have any immediate relative ancestor, so it's trying to position itself with respect to the viewport, right? So it's basically appearing on top of this non-positioned element. All right. uh, so this basically, whenever you use positioned elements, it creates a stacking context. It basically stacks elements one on top of the other. Now what we will do right now is, we have we have these divs, right? Let me uncomment those. Let me comment all of this styling for now. Okay. And let me get rid of these paragraphs. All right. And let's reduce the dimensions, or let me reduce the zoom level for this. Okay, it was somewhere around 200. Let me make it as 150. Okay. Now suppose I give this box the position of relative. Okay. And this child position, sorry, position as relative as well. Okay. And what we will do is, let's give it a margin from the, or rather, instead of using margin, let's specify left. And from the left, we want to move by, say, 20 pixels, like this. So you can see that the child element has shifted slightly, out of this. And let's also give it a bottom. From the bottom, it should move down by 20 pixels like this. Okay. So right now you can see that we have two relatively positioned elements, right? This one and this one. Okay, suppose I am moving this out of this, and okay, let me undo that. Okay, what I wanted to explain to you is, suppose I want to change the you know give me a sec, let me give you the correct example. So these two elements are here, we have given them a relative positioning. Let's give this the position as absolute, and this also absolute. Okay, so you can see that, and let's give this a width of, so since this is no longer inside the box element, it's taking up 100% of the entire width which is available. Let's change that to 400 pixels. Okay, and let's change the width, sorry, the height to 400 pixels as well. Okay, and from the left, let's move this further by 40 pixels. So you can see, and let me get rid of the bottom property. All right, so you can see that these two elements are on the same level, both of them are absolutely positioned, right? And since these are positioned elements, they're creating a stacking context. So this box element, right, that is being rendered first, and on top of it, this child element, that is being stacked on top of it. It is not really the child element. Let me just call this as another you know box, for example, so that you guys do not get confused. These two elements are right now siblings, right, because they're adjacent to each other, so it's no longer a parent child relationship. And you can see that this element is basically being overlapped by this element is overlapping this element, it's appearing on top of it. Suppose I want to change the order in which these elements are stacked. So in that case, uh, we can make use of a property known as z index. Okay, by default the z index is auto. Suppose I want this orange or this coral color box to appear on top of this one. Okay, what I can do is make use of the z index, and I can set that as 1. Okay, rather let me set that as 2. Give me a sec. Am I doing a wrong example? Let's create another div. And let's set the position for this as relative, and let me give this element the z index as 1. All right, so okay, so this was really not needed. Let's get rid of these. So you can see that the higher value, okay, I wanted to bring this element to the top, right? I want, even though both of these are positioned elements, this is being rendered first, and then this, the other box is stacked on top of it. If I want to change the order in which these elements are stacked, you can see right now the orange box is the coral color box is appearing over here, and the other one is appearing below it. Let me increase the size of this by say 20 pixels so that it's clear to you guys. You can now see that the coral color box is on top and the royal blue or the another box is behind that. Now suppose I increase this value to 3. Once again, since this element has a higher z index, it appears back on top. All right, so when we used position based elements, they create a stacking context, and elements are stacked on one on top of the other, and if we want to change the order in which they are stacked, we can make use of the z index property. The higher the value, the more on top it will appear, right? So you can imagine z index as the depth. If there are layers, right, so z index represents the depth, right, how like close it is to the user of the screen. Okay, so we have the x-axis, which is in the horizontal direction. We have the y-axis, which is the vertical direction, and then we have the z-axis, which kind of represents the depth, right? So uh no, there isn't a limit as such. So suppose you give this as 999, right? So this element will always appear on the top. Okay, so suppose I add another box over here, and I am placing it after this one, right? And let's give this the value third, for example. Okay, and over here, let's say third, you'll change the left of this by 20%, and also modify the background color and set it to say aquamarine like this. Let's save this, and you can see that this element basically stacked on top of another box because it appeared after it, but since this has the highest z index of 999, it is still on top. Okay, suppose I want this to appear at the top like this. I have to give a value which is higher than this. So now this is appearing on top. Okay, and so basically use this wisely, use this z index wisely, because it might you might raise the z index for one element, and then as you're scrolling it might overlap the content which is behind it. So use the z index where it is needed, not everywhere else. But this is just a property which allows us to change the position of the element within the stacking context. All right, then we have other two positions. So let's do one thing. Let's move on to our portfolio and we'll learn about that right within our portfolio. All right, so this is our portfolio, and we have our header, right? Suppose I set the position for this as fixed. Okay, let's save this. Um, so what it did is that it positioned, and let me give this header a border so that you guys understand. Let's give it a border of 1 pixel and let's set it as white. Solid. So this is required, right? So you can see that when you set the position as fixed, it is taking up only the space which is required by the elements in it. Now as I am scrolling, right, the header is staying in position. Okay, you can see that the header is staying where it was exactly. So it positions itself with relative to the viewport, right? So that is the visible area of the screen, right? So as I'm scrolling, the viewport is changing, correct? Okay. So the visible area basically represents the viewport, right? So as I'm changing, the visible area is changing. So it is positioning itself with relate, relative to the viewport. So as the viewport is changing, it is also moving around. All right. Uh, if I change the value of top and I say, for example, 30%, okay. So from the top, it has moved down by 30% from the top of the viewport. As I'm scrolling, it is always staying at 30% from the viewport. So this is the visible area now, and from that, whatever is the 30%, it is moving, it is positioning itself according to that. If I change the position to, say, for example, absolute, right, you can see that it moved from the top. So I made, let me correct myself. When we use the positioning as absolute, it tries to position itself to the topmost element if it does not find any parent which has the position set as relative. Now when I'm scrolling, right, it is being hidden, right? From the top, it did move by 30%, and it's only taking up the space which is required. But as I am scrolling, right, it is being hidden, right? Okay, so I was incorrect in saying that it positions itself with respect to the viewport when the position is set as absolute. That only happens in case of the fixed position. Okay, so as I'm scrolling, this element is moving. So another, so this is basically the fixed position. You might have seen apps, where we have this, plus button, which is, hovering in this section, like over here, for example. And as we are scrolling, that plus button is always available. For example, when you use the Gmail app on your mobile and you want to compose a new email, you see that circular plus button, and even though you're scrolling, you still see it. So it's using position fixed, right? They're setting a fixed position, and that button always appears at that position. Okay, so you can use that to give you can use this positioning to give that kind of an effect. The next property that the next position that we are interested in is known as sticky. So let's set the position as sticky. Let's get rid of the top. Let's save this. So you can see that the header is back the way it was, right? So by default, when the position is set as sticky, right, it behaves like a just like a static element. But once we start scrolling, okay, so I need to specify a top over here. From the top, I wanted to stay just at the top position. It should stay at the topmost level. So by default, it behaves like a static element. Okay, so before we applied any of this positioning, styling to this element, it was looking like this. Even right now, it is looking the same. Okay, but the difference is the moment I start scrolling, right, you can see that this is scrolling along with the entire you know page. So it is still, the moment we start scrolling, it positions itself relative to the viewport. Okay, by default, it's a combination of static as well as fixed, right? So by default, it behaves like a static element. And if the viewport is scrollable, right, then or the container element is scrollable, the element under which this header element is there that has some scrollable area available to it, it will position itself according to that, right? So right now it is positioning itself according to the viewport. So as we are scrolling, it is moving around. Let's do one thing. Let's give this a background of white, okay? And let's use the HSL format, and we'll use a slightly different variation of white, say 80% light, for example. And as we are scrolling, you can see that our header is, visible. It's sticking around. So this is the, magic of using position as sticky. You can see that this header is basically sticking around. You can also give it a slight border of 4 pixels and solid border bottom. Okay, so as you're moving around, we have this border available, so it is distinguishing between the content as well as uh, the header of this page. All right, so is the positioning CSS positioning clear to you guys? Are you clear with all the different values that we can set to the position property and the impact it has on the element? Okay. And another thing is I have moved our portfolio to the GitHub. Let me share the link with you in the chat. So this is where the portfolio is available. All right, it has the instructions. So you can see, let me expand this for you guys. You can see we have this main branch over here. So this will have all the latest code changes, and there are day wise branches available. So this is the code from day 1. Okay, then this is the code from day 2 where we added some styling to this, right? So day 1, it was just our regular portfolio, just the image was added, and we were using the normal heading tags along with the paragraphs. There was an ordered list and all of those things. So if you want to track the progress of the portfolio, you can switch to one of these branches, um, right? So this is where we added the typewriter effect, this thing. And then this is the branch from yesterday. Okay, and I'll be pushing today's branch as well, so you'll see a day 6 over here as well. And then we have the main branch which has the latest changes available. Yes, in yesterday's branch we had deployed our portfolio to Netlify, and we had also added a form which we were submitting to the Netlify. So the instructions are available over here, right? So you can click on this link. It should take you to the YouTube video from yesterday, where I cover the section about deployment, okay, of how to deploy the website on Netlify. Um, let me put this link in the chat. Okay, so you guys can go over this, and yeah, we will be covering React. First, I'm trying to build a foundation so that you guys have a solid foundation, you understand the basic concepts. Okay, So last week we had learned about some, beginner level CSS. This week we learned some more advanced concepts. Earlier we were using simple tags like div, span, etc. Now we're using semantic tags. And this is how we'll be progressing in the course. We'll be building on top of what we have learned. So we're moving to more and more advanced concepts now. As we are progressing, we'll learn more and more things, and it will you'll become a better web developer. As we proceed, you'll learn more and more advanced concepts, and then yeah, finally we will be moving on to React, learn its basics, and then move on to advanced React concepts. So you guys don't worry about that. We'll be covering a large number of topics. Just follow along. If you already know some of the things, it will be a good refresher for you, or you might learn, you might, if there were gaps in your knowledge, you might fill those gaps with these sessions. All right. So do try to attend these sessions if you know the topics, or even though you know the topics already. Okay. Okay. So that is it for this session. And I hope you guys have a happy weekend. For your doubts, we'll move on to the voice channel on Discord. Let's go through the doubts. And yeah, I'll see you guys on Monday right here live on YouTube. If you're liking the content, like this video and subscribe to the channel. And I would love to see your portfolios. You can tag Devsnest on all the social media platforms. You can tag me, Kshitiz, or Vedansh, any one of us, and share your portfolio. Show it off to your friends. You can show them whatever you're learning, how you're progressing, and build all the cool things, practice whatever we have learned so far, go through all the recordings, fill in the gaps in your knowledge, and build a solid base. And we'll if you have a solid foundation, we can easily move on to the advanced concepts. And I'm just waiting to teach you guys more and more advanced stuff. Okay. So see you guys. Good night, and happy weekend.